Hi, friends. It is I, host Eric, host of Talking with Fans People, and your salvation, the savior of Western civilization himself, me. What's that, Eric? You're gonna save Western civilization? It's not really Western civilization anymore. It's just general civilization. It's kind of all mushed together. Um, am I gonna save civilization? Yeah, I am. Today's the day when I, Eric, save all of humanity from otherwise inevitable collapse. That's right. Why? How? How am I going to accomplish this feat? Well, by explaining things correctly. That's how I'm going to do it. So, as is the ways of the things that am I, as are so things that such are such. Yiggity meow. I was Googling last night. I Googled the term global dread, which I was conceiving when I was thinking of it as being specifically, I guess, the notion that one feel dread at various framework levels, and that the global dread is maximally the biggest level of frame, right? Good morning, Legends Fall. Good morning, Mac Daddy. Hey, looks like a couple of ESTPs have come to visit me. Oh, I'm telling you right now, I'm not just predicting the future. I'm saving it. I'm saving human civilization from otherwise inevitable collapse or decline. So, here's the deal. Good morning, Death by Monkeys 419. Let's take a look-see-poo. Let's use our looking eyes for a second, okay? Because a lot of times we don't use those, but let's use them. Let's use our looking eyes and let's look at this thing here. So, this is an article. Well, this is the abstract for an article, actually, by Kent B. Taylor. And what I like about this article is it's an example of somebody who's doing their very best to not be agenda driven, but rather try to analyze things correctly as much as possible. But also that despite their best efforts, and I'm sure them being both an intelligent person and a TI user and everything, they get everything completely fucking wrong, right? And the reason is because you need cognitive functions. Weirdly. Namaste, lemon melon. Half lemon, half melon. Decide if you're a citrus fruit already. So, modern Western civilization reached a pinnacle in the last half of the 20th century, spending over 200 years evolving and spreading throughout the world. A robust social contract, technological advancement, and pervasive economic success in the context of democracy and capitalism propelled the project. Unfortunately, two underlying pillars of past success developed, intensifying negative consequences, hastening socioeconomic decline, insatiable collective wants, and global population growth. Um, you, you, Okay. The rise and decline of civilizations in history is well documented yet ugly ignored in today's dialogue. Contemporary civilization is assumed to be immune from the forces that shaped cycles of past civilizations, that our age is somehow an exception. For the first time, human planetary systems that seemed invisible until recently are sending us the message that our civilization is not exceptional, that there are finite limits to the thrust of humanity's present trajectory, viable solutions curbing the effects of habitat destruction, diminishing biodiversity, and climate change, along with rising inequality, debt, conflict, refugee flows, are known but not unimplementable. The current essay examines underlying causes of socioeconomic deterioration and entrapment, suggesting a comprehensive collective intelligence enterprise be launched to prepare for the global transition facing humanity. So, at the top of this, then, you've got you've got definitions of absolute poverty, and if consumer prices increase slightly faster per year than do incomes in the less developed world, essential goods become increasingly out of reach for most of humanity, who spend what little income they have on food and shelter. Democracy enveloped global politics in the aftermath of the Soviet Union's collapse. Despite nearly worldwide installation of democratic institutions, a growing percentage of citizens see these efforts as a sham, believing democracy is failing the people. Despite progress being made towards UN development goals, unprecedented numbers of refugees struggle to move to the developed world. Finally, surveys in America and Europe show the current generation of adults believe their children will not live as well as themselves. The notion of associated economic progress has been at the core of Western social contract for 200 years. Okay, so I'm going to get back to everybody's chatting in a second, but what's the basic thing here? Well, okay, where's the part I'm trying to get to? It basically says this here, this part. Something is amiss and not understood. The rise of false truths obfuscates and distracts, adding to social confusion. In what follows, there is a distinction made between tribal truth and objective truth, both of which are multidimensional and not fully fleshed out here. Tribal truth resonates with the human psyche needed during the millennia spent on the African savannah long ago. Okay, so this is... And so, the other evolutionary purpose of reasoning is to recognize objective truth. There is tremendous survival value in perceiving and reacting to the wolf growling behind nearby bushes or to your car careening out of control on an icy road. The reasoning here is also hardwired into our brain, involving a reflexive action demanding little attention. More advanced issues of objective truth, such as whether God exists or that climate change is real, are more difficult for most people to comprehend. So, I mean, does this not explain everything right there, you know? It's like, what's wrong with this? They don't have, they have inadequately parsed out why people differ and such. So, what they call objective truth is both observational intuition in the moment in real time and arguments about God are the same kind of thing, according to this, right? What do you mean it's social? I have an email. Okay, so this is absolutely insane, right? Just to think that. Okay, so they say here that these two kinds of truths, tribal truths and objective truths, are both multidimensional, not fully fleshed out here. In other words, too complicated to get into the details of. But then it's clear that there's the reason it seems so complicated and difficult is because they've done it wrong. It's really quite simple. You've got basically interested calculi, disinterested calculi, because why? Human beings relate to things on a range of maximally interested and not interested at all. So, in other words, I might find the story of what happens with a mountain's gold reserves interesting to read about. It's in Argentina, but I have no interest in the matter, meaning whatever happens, it won't impact me directly. So it's always the case for biological creatures that things matter more to them or don't, right? They have more or less of an interest in them. If I'm the kind of thing that a hawk doesn't eat, then there's no interest to me when a hawk passes over. So I'm not going to react any differently than if the hawk isn't there. If I'm something that a hawk does eat, then I have an interest in this matter because my well-being is at risk, right? So it makes sense then that we'd have both a logic of interest and a logic of disinterest, right? Now, the thing to note as well is it's also the case that the world has its various logics. So, in other words, being able to speak objectively about something, in other words, being able to deal with a matter of analysis under consideration, an object of analysis under consideration, objectively means exercising a disinterested calculus. But being able to deal with a broken down car objectively requires dealing with it in a totally different way. Both of the sets of data and the calculi are objective in some sense, in that the guy who's fixing my broken car, he is either going to successfully fix it or not, right? And he's got, in that regard, it's objectively the case that he either successfully fixed it or he didn't. But we aren't using objectivity to fix the car, right? In other words, like, fundamentally, the reason the car is being fixed is because I have an interest in fixing my broken car, and because he has an interest in fixing it for me because I'm going to pay him, and all those other considerations. So, in contrast, the reason I'm doing this is not the same sort of reason, right? There's not an interest here, besides that it's interesting, and that I have the actual answer. So, okay. We start with what I would consider to be a really good set of observations here after that very bad set of observations. Okay, so it's like, as far as objectivity goes, there's objectivity that deals with logic of systems that have their own logic. There's the objectivity that deals with the logic of language. There's the subjectivity that deals with the logics of language. In other words, how saying certain things are going to make people feel. And there's the subjectivity of the logic of the self. That is to say, well, I like cheese and I don't like bacon or something, you know. So, cognitive functions successfully taxonomies correctly these various ways of engaging the world. And it's all a matter of, instead of thinking about, and of course, this guy goes into this disastrously ill-advised evolutionary psychology nonsense, right? Like, so they point out on more complex issues, cognitive limitations such as bounded rationality, asymmetric information, heuristics, and biases come into play. It is here that those with dominant power often use the tools of tribal truth to persuade, inculcate, and sustain the status quo. The net result is a socioeconomically entropic state, the stage of senescence when civilization is characterized as progressing increasingly from order to disorder. All right, so here's the problem, right? This assumes, this falls right into exactly what we're talking about when we talk about somebody being frame locked. This person is frame locked such that they do not understand that what's going on here is not what they think is going on. All right, let me explain. Is it in? Yeah, there it is. Okay. So it's here that those with dominant power often use tools of tribal truth to persuade, inculcate, and sustain the status quo. What this does is it makes the same mistake that almost everything does. In other words, it creates this party that's somehow not subject to the same rules as everybody else. So it's like, in fact, if we want to analyze it correctly, it's easy to analyze. It's TE people successfully figuring out how to attain outcomes that are important to them and sacrificing TI legitimacy in the process. And the reason it works is not because being right is hard. In other words, in this guy's worldview, The reason it works is because most people aren't as smart as him. In reality, the reason it works is because most people aren't as TI robust. They don't have TI as an operational frame or a definite or a ontological frame, right? They've got it somewhere else in the stack. So they're more subject to being wrong. But the thing is, when we look at it through cognitive functions, we realize they are just projecting their frame biases as well. Well, tools can't be objective. So data can be objective. People are often described as objective. Calculi can be objective, but tools can't be objective. Objects aren't objective either. They're just objects. So that's important to remember. When what they're saying is basically this. There are two kinds of truths. Truths that smart people think about that are reasonable and rational, and truths that are emotional, basically. That because people in general aren't smart enough that they use their emotions too much. They haven't yet learned or mastered how to use the correct way of thinking. That's what's going on here, okay? Of course, that's bullshit. That's not what's happening. It's not that this guy is just as robust in his emotional calculi, but he's mastered the right kind of calculi. It's instead that we all, including the people that he presumes are using this sort of calculated exploitation techniques, they're not understanding them as such. They're just expressing their own frame lock as well. Because why? Because in all these various articles I look at about the collapse of civilization or something, any kind of big question, what do you end up with? A bunch of people all going things like either baseball's the best, football's the best, soccer's the best, or this is the best form of baseball. No, this is the form of best baseball. This is the best form of soccer. This is the best form of soccer. Okay? And nobody's explaining, okay, here's what you guys are all doing, right? So it's like, what we need to be doing is understanding why some people prefer baseball and some people prefer soccer. Some people think football is the best. And we need to explain what it is that causes this disagreement on things in a way that actually explains it. And so what actually explains it is you've got people who are TE, potentially NI, because just as there's relations between interest, there's also relations between identity and experience. In other words, when I encounter an object, I've got two vectors of relation to it. One, I've got a vector of relation that says, I've encountered this before. Well, it's just fate wind. It's really, but see, Mac Daddy, here's the thing. There's a particularist component we have to put into place as well. It's not enough to be objective. You have to be equipped with a lexicon of terms that emerges from a correct map. Otherwise, you'll end up with this thing where you've got everybody saying various things and none of them correct, because none of them have correctly answered the question, why am I saying this and not something else? So it's like the basic conceit of this writer, and basically every writer, is I'm not a person who's writing for my own reasons. I'm a removed observer presenting to you stuff you should agree with. And so it's like when I say you should agree with me here, I'm explaining to you, you should agree with me because while you are correct that there's no monopoly on truth by TI users, it's because I have it. I have the monopoly on truth. Or in other words, we can all have it. We just need to all agree with this understanding of cognitive functions, which we should for a multitude of reasons, okay? Which is to say, the reason these TI users have not successfully executed analysis of things is because they've been wandering in the desert with the rest of humanity, not understanding that there actually is a single metaframe through which everything should be explained, that actually explains things correctly. Because then we go, oh, I see what's happening. You've got people who are interested in their overarching bearing on things, taking over positions and roles that must be executed from a disinterested perspective. And when we understand that, it's like, long has humanity toyed with the notion that somehow we can designate for people where they belong in society. And it's always been based on the wrong things. Right? We can designate that you belong in the kitchen because you're a woman. We can designate that you belong in prison school because you're a child. We can designate that you belong working in the field because of the color of your skin. We can designate that you belong at the end of my sword because you're the wrong religion. All of these things are wrong ways to designate the roles of people, right? And so, by and large, humanity has accepted there is no, like the Western civilization has accepted, there is no way for we to designate you, your role, that's not incredibly oppressive. But the reason that's the case is because nobody's successfully, correctly articulated how people do fit into sets of that have clear capacities and deficits. And so it's like, it may not be possible for people who don't have good TI to do good thinking about the public interest and the public discourse. But it is possible for them to learn this. That type, he's not one of the types that's qualified to do this. It's possible for them to learn this, okay? Now, in the status quo, everybody does this all the time for stupid reasons. Like, he's got a PhD, so he's qualified to do this. He's got this certificate, so he's qualified to do this. Right? But the reality is, those things are just heuristics to try to get past the fact that we've not successfully understood why and how people are qualified or capable of doing things. And what cognitive function pair are most likely to believe that? Because I see those beliefs as tribal truths. Right. Okay, so the thing is, what I've explained already, Fate Wind, is that dichotomy that they're making there is bullshit. It doesn't make any sense, right? Because why? For them to have their tribal truths, they have to make intuitive responses to threats in real time the same kind of attention as arguments about the existence of God. So we can dismiss that dichotomy entirely. And you can see the damage it does when we don't operate through the right frame of reference. Now all of a sudden, Fate Wind's confused. Fate Wind thinks, oh, I get this tribal truths thing. I get that. Tribal truths are the truths I don't like. And objective truths are the truths I do like. That's what Fate Wind is saying, basically. So, okay, so MacDaddy says, you mentioned the basis of what typology is to many people, and they aren't that interested in the concept, so without knowing, many people have already denied to have knowledge of an essential understanding of the world. Right. Well, that's why I'm going to save the world. And the thing is, I need everyone else's help so that everybody explains to everybody else, goes, I know you're not going to believe this. I know it's crazy, it's insane, but there's this guy who claims to be the single most correct person in the world, and have the path forward to save humanity. You know, in some sort of epically self-deluded, like, cult guru sense of the claim. I mean, that's the sort of shit he's claiming, yeah. Except he's actually correct. And I know. I wouldn't believe me either. I wouldn't believe me either, you know? It's like, that's the reality of it. Is that I've come to accept over years and years and years and years. I've had to. I've had to come to accept it. Now note, what does it mean to be the most right person in the world? It means something very specific, actually. It means that your likelihood of being wrong decreases as the frames go up. So in other words, I'm as likely as anybody else to be wrong about some particular matter that doesn't cascade down, right? The more a given issue cascades down, the less likely I am to be wrong about it. So that's what it means to be the most right person. Is simply to say that that I've mastered the art of that, and other people can too. In order to do that, though, they have to have the framing right. So it's like, so Fate Win says, I see objective truths as an outcome of using the scientific method. For example, 97% of people who are dying from COVID are not vaccinated. Okay, so Fate Wind, what you're saying is you see claims that cite science stuff as objective, okay? Now, you could point to the data that proves your claim here and say, see, my claim is objectively true. And depending on how you state that claim, you might be correct. It would need to come with some conditionals and qualifiers. You need to say something like, in the absence of contravening evidence and or new revelations, we ought to conclude the following based on these studies. That would be a safe way to make an objectively true claim that includes an ought. So in contrast to what a lot of idiots say, if you look at like college kids playing with philosophy, aka idiots, you will hear them talk about how you can't get an ought from an is. This is the most ridiculous sort of nonsense imaginable. Is of course less objective than ought because it uses a be verb, a linking verb, which renders it automatically, necessarily, and absolutely metaphorical. Hi, Dad.
Busy?
I can
No,
take.
let's just take a second. Okay. Just want to, okay, we'll do it later.
Okay. Hey, Dad. Yeah. Wait. Hey, Dad. I just want to let you know I've got like 3 things today after this, so it's a pretty work. Yeah, I'm pretty busy today, but I got space in
As
between.
long as you're here, just let you know the window cleaners and cameras are in the paint on Tuesday. So you got to figure out what you want into the, or not paint, but the window cleaners, what you want is done and what you don't want done.
Okay, I will. Thank you. No, utter self. Look, so this is the thing. What utter self here says is there really an ultimate solution or an ultimate tool for every problem? No. But there is a single frame of reference that will preclude us from talking past each other without recognizing how we're doing it. that will preclude us from making mistakes like this, right? Because this is a fundamental framing problem. It presumes that there are some people who aren't subject to being something specific. That these people have both the intelligence to understand all of these things, such as cognitive limitations such as bounded rationality, asymmetric information, heuristics, biases, and the interest to exploit those for their own purposes at the expense of civilization. In reality, it's much more organic than that. And in some sense, this is an example of a fundamental attribution bias. So the thing is, what is the actual solution? Well, the actual solution will come when people can actually talk to each other. So what I'm offering is the precursor to the solution. What I say is I have the capacity, I have the means by which good thinkers can be on the same page and not have to fight about whether they're on the right page. Because good thinkers should accept this reality as predominant here and determinate. It is absolutely the case, both that the single most important question that should be asked and answered before anybody writes something like this, which is, why am I telling you this and why aren't you listening to me? Since they're not, that until people start addressing those questions first and foremost, and once they do, there's going to be a desperate need for some clarity about how to answer those questions. What cognitive functions, using cognitive functions properly rendered, as it is here, does is it offers that capacity to taxonomy human attention, behavior, argumentation, etc. You can frame everything through this to explain everything, and you have a common language. Right now, it's like we've got a bunch of people playing music, but there's no music theory. There's no sheet music. There's no notes. There's no explanation of it, right? There's just a bunch of people playing music. And so when I try to convey to you what I'm doing, I say, oh, I'm playing the ladder climb chord. What's the ladder climb chord? You know, it's that one where your fingers look like a little ladder. Oh, well, I don't know what that is. I have my own words for everything, you know. No, my ESTJ father is less objective than I am. He's much more subjective in the sense that when I want to talk to him about matters that are matters of objective calculus with language, he will default to, well, that's just not the way the world works, Eric. So what it means to say that he's much less objective is, let's say somebody threatens to sue him. I will determine whether they have a case or not and react accordingly. It doesn't matter if they have a case. The threat was made, therefore we defend against it. We don't evaluate it in terms of its actual merits, because that requires too much intuition, right? I'm not two steps ahead of anything. Okay? I want to make that clear. I'm not claiming to be two steps ahead of anything. Well, like I said, Fatewind, and the thing is, please try not to ignore my words, okay? That really bugs me. You can refer to people as objective, data as objective, or calculi as objective. So instead of saying there are two kinds of objective or kinds of objective, we need to stop doing that, right? It's like we got to stop talking in metaphor. Instead, operationalize and say, here are ways people actually use the word and what they're trying to do when they use it. Then we're actually communicating about something meaningful, right? We're not just talking past each other. So, in other words, when we make statements about what is about reality without any relation to observation and observers and agents, we're speaking in metaphor. Because reality doesn't manifest except via the agency and observation of an individual. We each of us manifest a reality, and nothing that is within the reality that we manifest is not entirely. It's not possible to understand it correctly in isolation from any observation, and that's what people keep trying to do, right? So, because there's this attempt to render into objects of analysis matters that require, if you're going to analyze them correctly, including the vector of the agent responsible for the object of analysis, or the agency involved in analyzing the object of analysis, and that's not being done. That's why people can't talk to each other. I'm not ignoring you, Boba Fett. Yeah, it's like a bunch of blind people feeling an elephant and trying to describe it to each other. Whereas if at least they understood that the reason they keep insisting an elephant is wet and inhales and exhales at your hand is because they keep touching the nose of it, and that there are other parts. And that they can continue to just operate as though elephants were wet noses, but they need to recognize that when we're dealing with the elephant as a whole, that people like them aren't qualified to do that. And people like them mean something in typology, whereas it's always, in all of human history, in every other instance, been a form of ontological assault. Trying to reduce an individual to a member of a group that is fundamentally a smaller set than the individual. In other words, whatever we can say about a group is going to be less complex, less expressed in less varied ways than individuals do. Except for typology. So it's like, it is the case that some people are going to be very offended by this, and some people are going to not like it. And that's because, as a society, we've made the mistake that this guy's made here over and over and over and over and over again. This guy doesn't see people who don't use his kind of objective reasoning as having something of equivalent value that they're better at. He sees them as just stupider versions of himself. Yeah, well, Elon Musk is one of the stupidest people, one of the dumbest successful people in the world. I mean, put it this way: the gap between how smart people think he is and how smart he actually is wider than for any other human being in the world. He thinks, I mean, like, his notion of a good idea is something somebody else has done before: electric cars, shooting a rocket into space. Something incredibly, just like the kind of idea that I throw away before it even lands on my tip of my brain, and he goes, "Ah, genius!" Like build a giant tunnel under Los Angeles. You're going to disrupt all the properties above it. It's going to cost so much money. It's like, there's got to be better ways to do that, right? He's got no respect for the biological or experiential half of knowledge. That's why he thinks you can just shove shit in your brain and who cares, no matter, it doesn't matter. Your body's just this machine you can just tinker with. He's not a smart person. He's convincing because, he's an extrovert thinker. He's got 0 SI, and he works his ass off, and on demand he produces extroverted intuition from the 6th slot. Most people aren't that good at understanding extroverted intuition, so they're fooled by it. They don't know what real good extroverted intuition looks like. Con paciene así y con saliva el elefante se follow a la hormiga boba. Quit speaking Spanish, Mattias. What do you think this is? Pinata Town? I can't understand your Spanish. Makes me feel like an idiot. Stop making me feel like an idiot. Right now. Wakata. Let me tell you something. Japanese is a small language. Japanese does not have very many words in it. They use the same word for lots and lots and lots of different things. Yeah, Musk suffers from ENTJ syndrome, which makes you the most dangerous kind of idiot, right? When you suffer from ENTJ syndrome, you spew your idiocy charismatically to gullible people without having any self-awareness that of the havoc you're wreaking. I agree with your argument between other credible objective truths. No, you keep using the word objective willy-nilly. Remember, truths can't be objective. What can be objective? It's like you're ignoring my words again. Data, people, or calculi. Okay? Truths cannot be objective. So don't say that and you won't be wrong. About that anyway. Remember to operationalize first to understand well. So to operationalize first but to understand well means first understand how people use the word true. It's a status we assign to statements we want to affirm. Now see how we're answering the question? Why are you saying this? And why aren't I listening? You need to answer those questions. I'm answering them for you. Why are you saying this? Because you're not listening to me, and because you haven't operationalized an understanding of truth. When you recognize that truth is a status you're assigning to a statement because you want to affirm that statement, then now all of a sudden we can talk, right? Okay, so I get it. You would like to affirm this statement. In other words, you'd like others to agree with it. And you've heard other people using these words, objective and stuff, and you've just sort of conflated that just means everybody must believe it. But now that we recognize that what you are doing is making some kind of advocacy, you're affirming a statement you'd like me to agree is true, and you're asserting that it has the status of truth, then we can operationalize further. Okay, so let's say I were to agree with you that let's afford that statement true. Now, what is it you would like to do with that agreement? And pretty soon we realize, okay, now that Fate Wind is being asked to engage meaningfully, like to be honest, right? Instead of, because people are lie to each other all the time, constantly. They do this thing where they make an affirmation, but they're pretending that they're making an objective description of something. An objective description meaning trying to remove your interest from the matter. But really, they're making an advocacy, which is trying to reason others into agreeing with you. So the thing is, data, calculi, and people are often described as objective, but really, what people mean is that that person's not being objective means they're using an interesting calculus. So I'm saying, but when we do want to operationalize a term, or at least understand how it's functioning in actual discourse, we'd say people use it to describe data, calculi, and people. Now, we see an instance here, Fate Wind using it to describe truths. But that's just like I said, that's a lie that Fate Wind is using to try to avoid the fact that try to avoid answering those first two questions. To avoid saying, I am advocating something specific that I would like you to agree on, or that would negate something you're saying in some meaningful way, or something like that, I'm going to position what I'm saying as though it weren't an advocacy. Look, an interested calculus is not just a personal bias. It's like it's reductive to refer to an interested calculus as a personal bias. It's instead, it's like human beings are creatures that like to live in groups apart. So I want all my own space, and I want to be in a big group of people. It's this weird contradiction. If you think about how the species, if we think about the species from a design perspective instead of an evolution perspective, which is just the stupidest thing in the world, because of course, a species is the perfect analogy for a type. There's variation within it, but it never changes. Except evolution has ruined that with its bullshit. And it's like, okay, so let's understand why people disagree about evolution or something. It's because it became symbolic for another issue. It's not because you've got irrational people who are opposed to evolution, rational people who are in favor of it. It's not because there are scientists who are taking a truly disinterested calculus about the matter who concluded this, and then there are people who are interested because they love religion so much and are opposing it. But that's how it's been framed. So people who aren't capable of, or don't want to, or aren't equipped with the foreknowledge of framing they need to understand what it means to actually make a disinterested calculus, continue to beg the question in evolutionary science. They continually beg the question. I've got to prove the thing I'm trying to prove. And so whatever happens, we assume the thing that's actually in dispute is not in dispute, so that we can continue to frame things as evidence of evolution, even when they're just evidence of adaptation within a genome that has long since Mendel been well established. Nobody's disputing genetics. Well, see, most people believe in evolution not because of social pressure, but because they're using a heuristic. They're saying, I want to side with the logical people, the smart people, the things that are upheld as virtues of academia and whatever else in society. And they don't want to actually be one of the smart people because it's hard, right? So it's understandable that people don't want to be one of the people who figure shit out, right? You'll notice that figuring shit out has taken over my entire life. But they do want to be right. And in the status quo, we don't have any mechanism for people to use, a good heuristic for people to use to avoid having to be themselves robust at figuring shit out. A good heuristic to use is make sure whoever you're listening to first answers those two fundamental, great, mysterious questions that have evaded philosophers for all of time. Why am I telling you this, and why aren't you listening to me? So that's number one thing. If somebody's not capable of answering those questions in a way that explains it fully and is intuitively satisfying and actually covers everything, and wow, hey, that does explain it. Oh my God. How is it that all of human history has spent time trying to explain why people disagree, and it's 2020 and this guy's still saying objective truth, a wolf growling behind the bushes, is the same thing, the same kind of attention, but they're not even really calculating the agency of the individual at all. It's just all metaphor, you know? How can it possibly be? Well, it's just how she rolls. You know, it's like there comes a moment in history when a confluence of various ideas come together and hit a single individual who's been set up with the right set of particularist preparatory frames, skills, etc., who was raised in the right house by the right parents, empowered in the right ways, and was a debate coach and all this other shit, right? Who then worked on trying to figure it out under scrutiny rather than in private. Critical, right? So it's like, why am I righter than other people? Because fate wind is constantly coming in and trying to shit on me. That's important. The job you do is important, fate wind. You're consistently wrong, but I need to, and everybody needs to, who if they're trying to make claims like this guy, why didn't he write this in front of people so that they could critique it while he's writing it? You know, that would be better. He'd be righter. He wouldn't be as wrong. He'd realize, oh shit, I'm not ready to write this thing. I got to go way back to the drawing board. And the thing is, it's not, nobody is brainwashing people. It's not, there's no they, right? It's what happens when people are not equipped with a lexicon of terms that can allow them to accurately understand themselves and others in terms of trade-offs rather than in terms of attainment of high watermarks. So it's like, if you think of being smart as something that anybody can attain and that, you know, it's like, it's not a function of who I am at the expense of something else, but just a special bonus A+ shiny gold thing that I get, then we'll never get anywhere. Because nobody wants to be dumb if being dumb doesn't come with anything good. Nobody wants to be wrong if it doesn't come with anything good. It's like, I am right, but I have to sacrifice a lot of attentional stuff to be right. It's like, I basically have no soul. And I don't really know who I am. And I'm like a baby with my emotions. I was watching this cartoon. Well, no, it wasn't a cartoon. It's a K-drama called, I forget what it's called. But it's about, Hotel Del Luna. It's a K-drama called the Hotel Del Luna. And it's about these people who, this hotel that comforts ghosts after they die before they go on to the afterlife, if they have unfinished business or whatever. Like, for example, like this one lady who's starved to death, she stays at the hotel and just eats whatever she wants forever until she's satisfied that she's gotten to eat enough, then she'll move on to heaven, right? It's like that. So there's this thing about this tiger, the last Siberian tiger that had been given to a South Korean dignitary by North Korea in order to establish diplomatic relations or whatever, and that the tiger wanted to go home, but it was dead now, and the tear, I couldn't watch it, and you know, I was just sobbing, and I've been so sad. I can't see this anymore. I fast forwarded past it. So it's like, in order to be right about this kind of stuff, I've got to be a complete idiot about lots of other things. Like the stupidest man in the world, you know? I can't carry things across rooms without knocking shit over. I can't take care of things on time. I can't sustain any kind of course of action purposefully or willfully over time. I've got no self-discipline. And this is despite the fact that, and this is proof of cognitive functions too, I was raised by a military father. And in no uncertain terms did he train me, and in no uncertain terms did all the training cease to carry over the second I had my own space. I learned nothing. I didn't learn a goddamn thing. It doesn't matter how many times I find myself starving to death, feeling about to pass out, and about to cry. I'll never learn a goddamn thing. I'll do it again tomorrow. It's frustrating. You think it's like, in order to be the person who's the most correct, I had to spend decades being every possible kind of incorrect first. You know? It's in order to be the kind of person who gets to be most correct, you have to be prepared to wait till you're 50 years old to be correct. You have to be prepared to have nobody listen to you even though you are correct. You have to be prepared to constantly be like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, then maybe 2 steps back, then 1 step forward, because you never, anytime you think you've got something like this and you go, yay, you know, every time something you go, nah, yay, says everybody, and then you go, oh, you like that, like this? Oh, I did it wrong this time or something. I don't understand yet. It's forever like that. For everything except being correct about what I'm saying about things and explaining things. And it's not the case that every ENTP is equally correct as me, or INTP or whatever, because it's not just a cognitive function stack that's necessary, it's also a shit ton of various particulars elements and a moment in time that all came together to produce this nexus of truth in a wilderness of intellectual chaos that is talking about many people. It's like, if we want to save the world, save humanity, save civilization, there's 2 ways to do it. 1, I can become president, or 2, I can become the most successful YouTube channel in the world. Either way will save humanity. The latter is very unlikely because my personality type is among the rarest, which means it's not necessarily easy for me to resonate with a great number of people with how I approach things. I'm going to go ahead and allow it, Yo-Yo, as long as it's way in the future. Now, Obama was an ENTP. And not a good president. So, I go to show you, it's not enough to have the right typological configuration. Well, why was Obama ill-suited to be president despite being an ENTP? Well, it's really an Enneagram thing. He didn't like to go to battle. He didn't know how to go to war. No, you're wrong, Pete Wind. So it's like that, right? You're making a statement there. Okay, so if in fact you and I really are in disagreement about Obama, and we were to be honest, we'd both say, well, neither of us have actually typed him, so we don't really know for sure. But if you were to be honest, you'd say, Eric's vastly more likely to be correct about this than I am. And instead, you're choosing to be dishonest because you can't shake your interested meows, right? What's her type? I don't know. I haven't thought about Michelle. No, Trump was an ESFP. And again, you're being dishonest, right? So it's like, if you want, to a certain extent, I am too. I'm saying, I'm asserting my claim as though we're not in dispute either. But I have much more reason to do that than you do. You know, it's like I actually am. And this is the thing. If you're FINI, then you really are ill-equipped to get why I'm right. Because you don't value the vast amount of experience I have in philosophizing, debating, rhetoric, argumentation, thinking, teaching logic, typing shit tons of people, making all these videos. That you don't value experience. You don't value that gives me some legitimacy, which it does, because you've heard and just sort of used as a quick heuristic that anecdotal evidence doesn't count, right? And so it's like you just dismiss experience entirely and incorrectly. And then you're basically mad because you think I'm too black and white in my thinking or something. You don't like me being able to successfully explain all this and reduce. And so you're attacking. You're attacking by challenging the legitimacy of what I say, while at the same time tacitly acknowledging that one of us must be correct, while at the same time willfully ignoring the fact that it's obviously me if one of us is correct. So it's like, it's helpful for me to know why you're so annoying. I mean, again, you might be having some sort of fun here, but, and you may find it fun to engage with me because I push, you're successfully able to elicit some impacts. So it makes you feel as though you've communicated something, even though it's not, those two don't link like that, Fate Wind is almost certainly TI polar. Right? Fate Wind's been around for a long time, and I don't recall them ever really engaging in a parsing way with anything. So probably TI polar. Probably anti-instrumental TI polar, I would guess. But possibly anti-fifth. I don't know. Could be ENFJ. ENFJs often sound like this too, but it's hard to say. I can't really type people from the chat. It's true that we can type the objects of analysis. In other words, I can kind of type people's writing, but what we don't know is what's going on to get there exactly. I mean, it's such a dumb question, Fitland. What's any about Obama? You mean, would you, let's phrase the question in a way that's meaningful. So, Eric, why do you think Obama's an ENTP? Can you cite something that would indicate to you that he's not an ESTP? Well, sure. So, if you look at any of his many speeches, the one thing that he consistently does in his speeches, and granted he's got a speechwriter, but the speechwriter is ergonomically designed for him, so to speak. It's this. On the one hand, we've got the richest Americans who are thriving and doing better than ever before. And on the other hand, we have an increasing inequality gap that threatens the very fabric of our country. In some sense, you might say we have an obligation to protect those who are less fortunate, and yet we cannot deny that the heart of the American economy is the agency of each individual and the capacity to then profit from their endeavors. It's true that America has the mightiest military in the world, and it's also true that confers on us the greatest responsibility in the world. I don't want to be an Eric who says one thing without qualifying it by adding an additional matter. I want to be an Obama who does the same thing for stupid reasons. Because I've come to see that FE is going to be I've mastered FE, so I've got to the top of the mountain for ENTPs. Unfortunately, they made him less qualified as an ENTP to be president. The country needs me as president because I'm both correct and fighty. I'm appropriately fighty. I'm also not reflexively always fighty. So it's like you need a strong leader is the bottom line. And Obama was a weak leader. Yeah, I might make some videos about those numbered things. The thing is, Raw Milk, what his speeches reflect is what ENTPs consistently do, which is they make their claims, they qualify them to make sure their claims are not too big, and they pay lip service to alternate things in order to reveal that, in fact, they've successfully considered the other alternatives. So that's what Obama did throughout his entire presidencies, both of them. And the reason his presidency failed so badly is because he kept thinking that he was just going to his way into agreement with people. And it's like, no, you can't do that and operate with trying to sustain this sort of like conflict avoidant. It's like he's a 9 or something, you know? It's not going to work. You've got to be willing to kick some ass and take some names. And you've got to be set up to do that. It's like there aren't very many people who have all these components in place where they have the attentional stack to be correct. They've got the particularist elements to be correct. They've got the right attitude as well, which is a combination of completely transparent, open humility and absolutely appalling arrogance. So the thing is, you will never find out that nobody will ever accuse me of being a pathological liar. Nobody will ever accuse me of being dishonest. People will accuse me of being too honest, too open, too transparent. We don't need to know that. TMI, right? No, I'm saying that to be a good president, especially now in this contemporary moment, requires a lot of different things be in place. And to be the right president, the president of the country needs, only one person has all those components in place. That's me. It's just how it is. I'm just saying Obama shows what happened when you get an ENTP who's missing some of those particular elements, who's become a relativist essentially, who's embraced the notion that they're going to win the TI arguments on the contention level and sort of not address them on the framing level. He's basically irrelevant. He didn't really believe in anything except the idea that some sort of general notion of helping people. It was very obvious when he took office that he didn't really believe in anything. I don't think he played the race card. I don't agree with that, Alan Bryan. I think Obama played it fair and square regarding that. I mean, a lot of people on his behalf may have played it. There's no doubt that the American populace considered it a factor. But if you're going to say any expression of his identity that included race was playing the race card, well, then everybody's always playing the race card. What does that mean? What does it mean to play the race card? That I should get a pass because I'm a certain race? That you should listen to me because I'm that race? That you should support me because I'm that race? That I'm more correct because I'm that race? What does it mean to play the race card? I don't know, Alan Bryan, and I don't agree. Thanks, Fate Wind. If I can get Fate Wind's vote, I mean, sky's the limit, right? If if Fate Wind and I can talk to each other, and this morning it seems like maybe we're talking to each other a little bit more than we usually do. And it's partially because I'm recognizing I need to do a better job of highlighting the fact that in order to be right, I have to be almost not fully human in a way that other people get to be fully human. Sensors get to be fully human in a way that intuitives don't. I got an email. In fact, I was going to make a video, and I have to end this live stream pretty soon because I got a typing coming up in 10 minutes or so. But I got an email this morning. I suppose it's still there. No, it's not still on my... it is not, as a matter of fact, still on my... it is not still on my clipboard. Clipboard, 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 yeah. A clipboard, clipboard, a clipboard, yeah. Clipboard, clipboard, a clipboard, yeah. Put it on my motherfucking clipboard, yeah. I like to cut and copy onto my clipboard. Later I'm gonna paste. I like to copy and cut onto my clipboard. Yeah, 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 it's a race. Who can copy the most? Who can clip the most? Who can have the most clipboard? Who can have the most stuff on their clippity board? I want to know. In the Lord, clipboard. Yeah, yeah. I'm copying to the clipboard. Yeah, yeah. If you don't like to copy and paste things, what's wrong with you? You know? Bye, Fate Wind. Don't forget to eat plenty of bees. We're eating bees this time. It's a little different than usual. I'm going to share this with you guys so you understand what I mean by we don't get to be human. This is an email I got from INFJ. Clipboard, yeah, yeah. I got it from my clipboard. Uh-huh. I got it from my clipboard. Yeah, yeah. What am I not agreeing with? How could I not agree if you don't know? What don't I know that I'm not agreeing with? I didn't agree with the race thing. I don't think he... Well, I mean, I haven't understand what it is. By my understanding of what a race card is, he didn't play it. To play the race card, by my understanding, is to say, you should ignore relevant things and instead focus on my race. And I don't recall him ever saying anything of the sort. So if you mean something different by the race card, then explain what you mean. But by my understanding of what it means, he didn't play it. So in other words, I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt by saying, maybe I don't understand what you mean by the race card. I know on your channel you've touched on many different topics relating them to MBTI. I've seen some of your videos in particular where you explain how INFJs are not very in tune with their FI and how this causes them issues figuring out how they feel. It has also seemed to me that you were trying to explain that the constant use of an FE mask can cause INFJs issues, possibly with things such as figuring out their emotions and their identity as well. I was wondering if you had any advice for INFJs trying to deal with these potential issues. I just thought this topic might also interest you. I'm mainly asking because you typed me as INFJ before, and since then I've noticed some of the FI-related issues you've explained, particularly not being in tune with what I would call my identity. Right. You know, in other words, if you're going to be maximally correct about the external world, you lose the capacity to understand the self. It's, you know, like Rachel doesn't really have any friends exactly. And I do, but I have the same problem she has, which is I'm extremely bad at sustaining relationships. So the friends I have are friends who call me all the time. And, you know, occasionally I'll show up and surprise them, like I did with Dave the other night, where he just put it on Facebook and we just showed up and surprised. Here we are, you know, which was great. I feel pleased because I always want to make sure I contribute at least the minimum I have to sustain a relationship before they just go, you know what, you're a fucking asshole, dude. You only call me when you have something you want, and every 6 months, you know. Hey, Alan Bryan, I'm black. So that got you one better, okay? I just played the race card on you. That's playing the race card. Mm-hmm. That is. Okay. Now I've got to go because I've got a game of race poker later. And I need to gather together all my race cards. After that, we're going to play Race Go Fish. And then we're going to play Race Bridge. I've got it in spades. Yeah, we both have the same number of what are they called? What is it when you get a thing? Forget. It's been a while since I tried to play bridge. Race tarot. Right. Instead of like having the chariot, you can have the Asian. the native peoples. Native peoples is the greatest name for a. It's like I don't know if it's a band or a rapper. Somebody's named Native Peoples. It's like that's a hilarious name. There used to be a band in LA that never really got very big, but I guess it was fairly successful playing around because it was called the Negro Problem. So yeah. Boba Fett, hey. I'm assuming you're talking about chinks in my armor. I'm just going to go ahead and assume that. I do have a few. I also have a few crackers in my barrel. That's another expression. You know, yes, I have chinks in my armor and crackers in my barrel. That doesn't mean I'm a racist. All right. I also have coffee nips, which are apparently nothing to do with Japan. It's like, I don't know. Okay, so goodbye. I love you. Please love me back. Please agree that I'm the rightest person in the world. Please. I'm dying out here. It's fine. I'll be fine. Don't worry about me.